So welcome back, everybody. Let me tell you what we're doing in this next session, right? A lot of what we've talked about is sort of how do we get additional help and support to farmers and landowners who are looking to implement practices that will improve soil health. Obviously, one source of that financial assistance is through NRCS financial assistance programs. So we have asked Melissa to join us. Melissa Bartz is with Wisconsin NRCS. She is the Assistant State Conservationist for Financial Assistance, and that is primarily, she will explain more, but my understanding is it's primarily the Environmental Quality Incentives Program or EQIP and the Conservation Stewardship Program or CSP. There is a third program that everybody should be aware of, probably most everybody is, and that is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. We are intentionally not going to talk about that this afternoon. If we have time, we have asked Melissa to talk specifically about EQIP and CSP. But tomorrow morning, we do have a session with a couple of folks who have used the RCPP program to be doing this kind of work. So we'll have an opportunity to talk about it later. But before Melissa gets started, we thought it would be helpful. So if you all can, again, go to the poll section in the Pathable platform, you will see there is a poll here, which is what is your level of knowledge about these financial assistance programs? And Melissa, for your benefit, you may not be able to see, the orange is not much knowledge. The blue is a basic understanding, and the purple is we know these programs inside and out. So I think you've got quite a range of knowledge, but in the primary audience are folks who really don't know a significant amount about either program.
Yeah, this should be a good opportunity for them to learn.
Right.
We got a wide range.
There you go. All right. So with that, then I'm just going to hand it over to you, and we will then have time after you do your presentation for comments, questions, et cetera, et cetera. So, but welcome. Thank you for joining us. And we turn it over to you. And I think Jamie is running the slide deck.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chris, and good to be with you this afternoon. I'm going to run through EQIP and CSP and talk a little bit about soil health and have plenty of time for questions, and you can ask me anything at the end. So with that, like Chris said, she gave my long-winded title and introduction, but I work in Madison out of the state office for NRCS, and like she said, primarily EQIP and CSP are two main programs. Obviously, we cover more than that, but for today, we're going to talk about those two. Next. So like I said, EQIP and CSP today, navigating through the process. So if you're working with landowners and farmers, where can they go? Who can they talk to? How can they sign up for these programs? How can they help with soil health? Folks that are interested in doing more on their farms for soil health, and then where to go, some resources on where to find the local NRCS point of contact for that producer, or for you to connect with the office and what you can help us with and what we can help you with. Next. So looking at programs, just overall, kind of what is our series of events? What happens when somebody applies for a program? How does NRCS work at the field office? Just an overview. So typically this is the process. Somebody comes in, they've heard of our programs, they'd like to sign up for a program, or maybe they have a problem on their farm or land, and they come in and they start to plan with our conservation planners in the field office. And that planning, we really try to work with what is that landowner's objectives? What do they want to accomplish? Listen to them, and then really get on the land, walk the land, do that planning so that they know what we can do and what they would have to do and how to work together to implement conservation. Application, you'll hear me say this probably 3 or 4 times. We take applications year round continuously. We do have cutoff dates or application deadlines or batching dates. Those are all the same thing. We take applications continuously, but at some point we have a cutoff and we evaluate all the applications that came in up to that point and cut that sign up off. We continue to take applications for the next sign up, but we do have to have those cutoffs. And then evaluation. So that looks at, you know, how does this application rate or rank against other applications that have come in? Where can we do the most good? Where can we get the most conservation benefit? Looking at the assessing and ranking of that application. Then we move on to contracting. Our field office staff look at pre-approving, approving, and then obligating contracts. So obligating is really putting that money to that contract. And that's where that producer signs on the dotted line and agrees to implement conservation. Implementation, so that's actually doing a conservation practice, planting a cover crop, doing that no-till. What are they actually doing in that contract? Certification and payment. So once that practice is implemented, we go out, verify that they did it according to our guidelines, and then we certify that it was done and we make payment. And then operation and maintenance. So some of our practices, they need to be maintained maybe up to 20 years. And we really need that producer to agree to that and continue to do that maintenance to make sure that it functions for that lifespan. All right, next. So when we're talking about like EQIP, conservation practices, what are we really talking about? We're talking about a conservation practice standard. So here there's a clip of our terrace standard, and that really is like a prescription of where should that practice go? What does it do? And how do we make sure that it's installed properly to function and do the job that it was set out to do? That conservation practice standard, it develops that level of quality needed for the design and implementation, and then also the operation and maintenance. What does that producer need to continue to do to make sure that it functions and that we're getting the most we can for taxpayer dollars? All right, next. Eligibility. So ahead of getting a contract with NRCS, there's a certain amount of eligibility paperwork that needs to be done with the Farm Service Agency. We are a sister agency with FSA, and their part in our programs is really working with the producer to make sure that they have control of the land that they say they do. They're given a farm and a tract number, and that's just like an accounting system of what land does that producer operate or own or manage. And then they also have to be in compliance with adjusted gross income requirements of the Farm Bill and highly erodible land and wetland compliance of the Farm Bill. So just making sure that they're not receiving benefits through EQIP or CSP, but maybe doing something negative, such as draining a wetland or farming with a higher soil loss than required. So we want to make sure that they're in compliance, that they're eligible before they get a conservation contract. And then looking at land eligibility, our goal is really to improve working lands. So we need to be improving the conservation benefit, raising that level of conservation on that farm, and not just improving productivity of a crop or of the farm, but also have that conservation benefit. All right, next. Eligibility, along with that goes land eligibility and resource concern eligibility. So when you hear NRCS talk about resource concerns, what we're really talking about is there an obvious or an issue on that farm that we can improve with our conservation practices? When we go out on the farm, our planners, they inventory what are the resources and the resource concerns on that farm. So they're looking at, soil, water, air, plant, and animal resources, like that farmstead area or that crop field. Is there a waterway? Is there a ditch? Does it need a waterway? Those kinds of things. And we have different resource concern terminology, but the major ones are like erosion, degraded water quality, plant productivity or plant health. Those types of things are what you'll hear from NRCS staff. All right, next. And so now we get into our first program, EQIP. So EQIP stands for Environmental Quality Incentives Program. This is really our largest program financially and just largest participation with producers. Obviously, we're trying to help people help the land, and we're providing those financial incentives for producers to adopt practices long-term on their operation. Along with the financial part is our technical assistance. So if we are going to provide financial resources, we also need to have the know-how and the time to work with producers to make sure that they know what they have to do to be successful and how to implement conservation. And so we call that our technical assistance, out there working on the farm with them to make sure that they know what they need to do to properly install these practices. Land uses, we work on forest land, crop fields, pasture land, farmsteads, those working lands that I talked about. And then EQIP is available in all counties and all states. So very many opportunities to be involved in EQIP. Next. Looking at the funding, like I said before, it is our main funding program. Within EQIP, you can think of EQIP as like the umbrella, and underneath EQIP, we have targeted fund pools or initiatives that we call them, looking at, possibly looking at a smaller geographic scope or locally what a local watershed might need. Those might be initiatives or a targeted fund pool under the main EQIP program. Other programs related to EQIP, like Chris mentioned, there's RCPP. Many of you are probably aware of that program, working with partners. And in Wisconsin here, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is a very large part of EQIP that we offer for the area that drains into Lake Michigan. Some fund pools, like I mentioned, are available statewide, and others are limited to certain geographic areas, such as watersheds, mainly watersheds, but there may be like some other geographic area that needs attention, 303D watersheds. Depends on the geographic scope of that fund pool. And then in our state, in Wisconsin, we average between 1,300 and 1,500 new EQIP contracts every year. And annually, we typically spend around 30 million. So like I said, we get quite the budget to implement EQIP, and it takes a lot of staff to do that. All right, next. Looking at farm planning. So when I talked about planning, we go out on the farm, we walk the farm with the producer. What we're looking at is, what is the issues out there? Are there things that the farmer or landowner may want, but are there other things that we need to do ahead of what they are asking for, what they want? If we're talking about soil health and we go out and maybe they want to talk about cover crops, but we see a situation like this photo where there's obvious erosion going on, then we need to look at, what do we need to do to work up to that cover crop practice? We need to install a grass to waterway here to stop that erosion, because we can't build soil health if we have this level of erosion occurring. So folks might have one idea of what they need or what they want, but we may need to do more planning with them to bring them along to get to that level. All right, next. And this is an example of trying to solve that erosion resource concern by installing a grass to waterway. Next. So looking at the EQIP connection to soil health, like I mentioned, we have the financial resources. We offer over 100 conservation practices, including soil health management practices. And then I gave some examples here of the major practices we're talking about with soil health, and currently what the rates are that we pay. Cover crops, and you'll see there's a difference there, $33 per acre. No term, that means no termination. So that'd be for a cover crop that you don't need to terminate in the spring. It will die over winter, it'll freeze out. That would be a lesser payment rate than maybe planting a multi-species mix, like a rye, red clover, and a bean or some type of multi-species mix, where you get a higher payment rate because you're going to have a bigger impact by letting that overwinter and let the biology in the soil expand. No-till, these are just current rates, $20 per acre, nutrient management, $15, prescribed grazing, between $25 and $60 an acre, depending on what level of rotation you're doing with the livestock. And then conservation crop rotation, $10 per acre. And that practice is really just adding another crop or another, like a small grain, to maybe a corn soybean rotation to try to diversify a little bit what's being planted. All right, next. Moving on to the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. Next. What is CSP? It really is a program that rewards folks for the current conservation that they're doing, but provides additional incentives to get them to adopt new conservation activities. It's a 5-year program, so there's a long-term commitment there. And then at the end of the 5 years, there's an opportunity for renewing that contract for another 5 years. The eligible land uses, like we talked about with EQIP, pretty similar there. Forest land, cropland, pasture land, farmstead, and once again, available in all counties and all states. Next. Conservation Stewardship Program is really like a step up from EQIP. The obvious or the items that the producer wants to address, we can do through EQIP kind of one at a time. Through CSP, it's really enrolling their entire operation. So we're looking at the entire farm or the entire farms that they run, the entire operation. And through CSP, something different than EQIP, we offer practices like we do in EQIP, but in CSP, we also offer enhancements and bundles of enhancements. So where like a example would be forage and biomass planting in EQIP, code 512 there. That would be, trying to improve the pasture for rotational grazing. But in CSP, we could do the enhancement. What's listed there is E512B, where we're doing a forage planting to help increase organic matter in depleted soils. So it's additional criteria above that basic conservation practice. And then we also have the option for bundles, where we're trying to bundle a group of enhancements that complement each other and contract that through CSP. And like I mentioned, the entire operation is included in that contract. All right, next. Just some example payment rates in CSP to give you an idea of how those are calculated. Farmstead and cropland are both at $7.50 an acre, and then it goes down from there. Next. Like I mentioned before, there's an opportunity for renewal in CSP for another 5 years. So we can really look at long-term commitments to conservation and really getting a leg up on what they want to do on their farm for conservation. There's no minimum acreage requirement, so that's a big point. You know, it doesn't matter to us whether the producer has 5 acres, 500 or 5,000. We can work with anyone. The minimum payment per year per contract is $1,500. So if there is a small landowner, a relatively small acreage landowner, they can still get that $1,500 to make it worth their while to participate. And in 2022 in Wisconsin, we did 490 contracts covering over 160,000 acres, over $15 million obligated in CSP. And I just have to mention, Wisconsin, we do have, the last couple of years, we do obligate the most contracts in the nation in CSP. So there's a lot of opportunity for that program as well. All right, next. This is not a all-inclusive list, but examples of those CSP enhancements that I talked about in terms of soil health, looking at some of the practices and enhancements that we offer under those different headings there, the biodiversity, pest management, crops, soil and water, and then the livestock and wildlife. So quite a few there that we offer. Anything that will, you know, add wildlife habitat, control erosion, get that permanent cover, and then also, you know, those cropland practices. What can we do, like nutrient management, no-till, cover crops to really get the nutrient cycling and building that soil health. All right, next. When to apply for programs. So like I mentioned before, I wanted to hit on this a few times. The best time to apply is now. Whenever you have a producer that's ready to go, they want to apply, see what it's all about, have them get in, talk to their NRCS representative, and have them fill out an application. There's no one way to do it or another way to do it, but sometimes it works best to have the NRCS planner come out to the farm and walk that farm with them to get an idea of what we can offer and look at what they want to do on their property. Other times folks fill out applications and we work from there. So they fill it out, then we schedule an appointment, go out to that farm and walk it with them. So either way works for us. We always accept applications. All right, next. So I wanted to put a few links in here on where to find your local NRCS staff. A good way to find them is going to your state's NRCS website. So just search in your search engine for your state NRCS, and you'll get a screenshot that looks like this. And under the Contact Us tab is where you can find your local service center. Also on the website, you'll find under that Newsroom tab, just to the right of the Contact Us tab, that will give a list of all of the local or all of the recent news releases. So anything that applies to like sign up deadlines or new programs, that would be the place to find that. So pretty helpful place to look. All right, next. Another really nice resource that is kind of getting more developed as time goes by here is farmers.gov. Farmers.gov is a place for the producer to sign up and really interact with the local office. They're like I said, they're adding more features to this every day. But if somebody's not signed up yet, they can go to farmers.gov, put in the drop down, their state and their county, and get that local point of contact for NRCS, find out who the local staff are. That'll give address to the service center and also the email addresses and phone numbers. So it's a really nice place to go look. All right, next. I'm gonna hit on it again, application process. We're accepting applications year round. The batching period, it occurs at least once a year. That's where we cut off those applications, evaluate what we have, and rank and start to obligate contracts. Applicants can apply with their local office. Our staff will help them through the application phase and working with their land eligibility. What do they need to do at Farm Service Agency? What do they need to fill out? When does it have to be done by? We'll help them through all that. And then after the application is submitted, if we haven't already, we'll complete a site visit and work with them on planning documents. So the planning documents would be, how to implement the practices that they're thinking about implementing. Next. Those applications, when we get them, we prioritize them and we rank them. And we're really looking to try to get the applications that have the most benefit, conservation benefit, to the top, prioritize those to get those done first. The highest ranked applications will be funded first until our funds run out. And it's possible that we may get additional funding in the middle of the year or at different times that we're not planning on, but we might get them anyway. So it's important to always have that application in with the office. We can always be working ahead. And then we work with the applicant to complete the contract paperwork. So there's, contract documents that need to be completed. It's really where they're signing on the dotted line. They're committing to this. They know what is expected of them. We're working through that communication to make sure that we have a plan on how to get it done. And we do have an opportunity that if they come in, we're not going to be having an application cutoff deadline soon. If we get all the planning done ahead of time, we can help them apply for a waiver where they can actually start the work, the conservation work that they would be doing in their contract. They can start it early. And then as long as that doesn't guarantee funding, but if they do get funded later on, we can pay for that work that was done. Where typically we cannot start any of that work ahead of a contract. So we can work with them a few different ways and be flexible with their timeline. All right, next. And then I wanted to lay out some expectations of our participants and what they could expect. And it's really important for them to be a decision maker and be ready to help make decisions and move forward in the process. So they need to be active. We need to be able to get a hold of them. They need to actively be engaged. And if they're not, we really can't move forward. We're not going to push anyone. It's really on their own. It's totally up to them how fast we move through this process of planning. But if they're not participating or if they're not getting back to us, we really can't move forward. These are contracts, they're not grants. So there's a timeline that we have to follow. If they're not following that timeline, it could result in payback of funds. and terminating the contract. So we try to be as customer friendly as possible, but at some point, you know, if things are getting behind and we're not hearing back, we do have to look at getting that money back so we can try to put that towards other contracts in the future. Realistic expectations. Like you folks probably know, entering a contract, it requires time and a financial commitment. So they just need to be aware of that ahead of time. We try to communicate that, but we, you know, typically our conservation practices are funded around 75% of what it would cost to implement, and that other 25% needs to come from the participant. So we're not paying for everything. Typically, there needs to be that portion that they're helping with. And then just communicating, you know, being available and returning phone calls, that kind of thing. It's pretty important to get through these programs and these contracts. Next. All right, partners, where can you all come in? How can you help us? How can we help you? Education and outreach, just helping spread the word about our programs and soil health can really help everyone try to push the message and get more conservation on the ground. Conservation technical assistance. We do have partners that help us with planning and help plan practices with producers. That can be a huge help to us. Field days, pasture walks, really demonstrating or showing these practices working on farms help spread the message and help sell conservation more than just me going out and talking to farmers. Seeing it in action and letting them see it on other farmers' fields and farms is really important. All right, next. Other ways that partners can help, just connecting with the public affairs specialist, usually in the state office, being aware of, you know, who the local staff is, having meetings or talking with them about upcoming deadlines, you know, what programs are available. Having a basic understanding of programs can really help when we're trying to get producers and interested in soil health. State Tech Advisory Committee, that's one way that partners can help and really hear and have a decision-making role in how we are rolling out our programs. In Wisconsin, we have a advisory committee meeting once every quarter, and that's where we give updates to partners. And usually there's some kind of decisions that need to be made, and we ask for input at those meetings. So that's one way you could participate in your state at the state level. All right, next. The soil health principles, I just want to cover these quick. You've probably heard them, but looking at the 4 principles that NRCS believes in: maximizing the continuous living roots, minimizing disturbance, maximizing the soil cover, and maximizing the biodiversity. And I have listed there in each quadrant kind of how we're measuring that and how those resource concerns fit in with those soil health principles. All right, next. Some of the practices that are involved in each of those principles: cover crops, planting green into the cover crops, so planting that corn or soybeans, that main crop, right into the cover crops. No-till for minimized disturbance, reduced tillage and pest management, residue management and conversion to perennial cover under the maximized soil cover, and then maximizing biodiversity with crop rotation and or integrating livestock on that land. All right, next. Here are some photos of interseeding in Wisconsin, really getting that cover growing between the corn rows, usually at the V5 stage or later. But this is really catching on. We have demonstration farms that are highlighting this interseeding work, and it's really spreading. Other folks are trying it after they're seeing it work on our demonstration farms. All right, next. Planting green. So kind of taking that cover crop one step farther. Instead of killing it ahead of planting into it for the next year's crop, we are planting right into that. And our farmers are really innovative, adjusting existing tillage or existing planting machinery to be able to help use what they have, but plant it into that cover crop. All right, next. Here's kind of a side-by-side of what the benefits of soil health are. So there on the left, there's a large field there where they've been implementing the soil health practices over 10 years. And then on the right, a conventional field where they've used conventional methods and tillage. And this shows weather resilience in a drought year. Where can we get the most yield? Where does our soil bounce back? Where is it most resilient because of that organic matter and that biodiversity? It's really in that soil health field. And when there's stressors such as drought, that's when it really shows. All right, next. Here's some success stories from Wisconsin. Soil health has been a really big push. Now it's kind of morphed into climate smart is another title that we're using. Regenerative ag is another title you'll hear, but really the no-till and the cover crops are kind of the pillars of building that soil health. And we're doing it on quite a few different farms. Like I said, we have our demonstration farms through our GLRI area, and we're trying out a lot of innovative techniques and practices there. All right, next. And here's my contact information. If anybody after today, they want to get a hold of me, I'd be willing to have a discussion or answer any questions. So I believe that's it. There might be one more slide. Yep, that's the last one.
Okay, well, thank you ever so much, Melissa. That was really helpful. So if people have questions, please raise your hand or put them in the chat. And while we're waiting for folks to think about questions, Melissa, let me ask you one that came up earlier when we were having a smaller group discussion about conservation plans. And the question was, there were a couple of questions related to it, but one is that if a landowner or a producer has a conservation plan, and it needs to be updated because it was done, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And we're thinking particularly about this is happening on a protected piece of farm ground in an easement that they needed to have a conservation plan. How easy is it to get an update? And is that what one gets, or is it, and then we had a conversation about whether it's easier in fact to encourage a landowner to think about EQIP or CSP, because it might be they would be able to get in the door quicker with NRCS if they were coming in search of financial assistance. So can you offer thoughts on that?
Yeah, the conservation plans, it probably would be a little bit easier if they have an idea of what they want to do. If they know there's certain practices that they want to do and they come in, that would likely rise to the top of our priority list on, what can we move forward on? They've already got an idea. They may need a little help with a site visit from us. But if they've got an idea of what they want to do, that's going to rate a little bit higher with how we prioritize our work. If we know that they're working on a protected piece of property, we've got that long-term benefit already in place with the easement. That also is a very high priority for us because we know that our efforts are gonna, it's gonna be definitely worthwhile because that property is already protected. If for some reason they come in and want a conservation plan and they're not getting one, that would be an opportunity to possibly go through you all as a partner if you've got that information of that state public affairs specialist or the state easements contact. That would be a good conversation to have to let them know that for some reason those people aren't getting the assistance they need. That way we can make sure that we reach out to the field offices and let them know that this is very important, it needs to get done. So I think just that communication of, you know, what do they need from us, and we need to make sure we're providing that customer service one way or another. So.
Okay, that's very helpful. One other question, because I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, right, Brian does have his hand, so I will stop. I'll let Brian jump in here. Brian, go right ahead.
Mine's just quick and maybe a clarifying question, Melissa, but so let's just say you have 20 properties. If you do a CSP on one property, do you need to do it on all of them, or how does that work again?
Yeah, so we consider it an entire operation program, but we know that with, like, especially in our state, there's a lot of year-to-year type lease agreements where they don't know, the producer doesn't know if they're going to have control of that farm 3 years down the road. If they don't have control, they don't know how long they're going to have that property, they do not have to include that in the application. And obviously, if they include properties that they believe they have control over, and they lose them due to some issue, some outside issue that happens, we work with them to remove that from the contract, but maintain the rest of the property in the contract. So we are pretty flexible. We work with them, and we know that we have to be flexible to get participation because things change year to year in the markets, and land changes hands year to year. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but we try to include the entire operation. It's to their benefit. If they can't get control from that, a rental agreement or some other type of control, then we don't include it.
All right, thank you.
And can I just ask a further follow-up to that, that if it has to be the same sort of bundle of practices on all, so back to Brian's hypothetical, somebody owns 20 different, or owns or operates 20 different parcels. Is that CSP contract envisioning that the same kind of bundles and the same resource concerns are going to be across every parcel? Or can it be mixed and matched because every parcel is going to have its own resource challenges?
Correct. It can be mixed and matched because you may have, you know, a highly erodible farm with steep slopes, and you may want to do cover crops on that piece of property, but then you may have maybe a field that is flat and has a need for a buffer along a stream, something like that. So each property or each farm is looked at differently, and CSP, they're not required to do something on every acre. So it's pretty flexible. And they can start small, and then, you know, if they work into another contract, a renewal contract, they can apply different items on different land depending on what they need.
Okay, great. Other questions? Again, while people are thinking about it, I'll jump in. I know that one of the things that we hear often is, well, these programs are oversubscribed, right? And we understand that there's a lot more demand than there is program availability. So I guess I have a two-part question. Is one, sort of, how do you manage expectations with the landowner or producer? Again, if what this group of people are largely folks who are engaging farmers and landowners, and we're not the specialists, and to say, well, talk to NRCS because they have funding available. And if a landowner says, I did that 2 years ago and I was told to come back in 5 years, or, that I was a low priority. How do you manage that expectation? And then the second part of it is, given this new funding that is coming through from the Inflation Reduction Act, that is going to be significantly more resources for both EQIP and CSP, is that a way to say to a landowner or a farmer, you got a better chance now because there's more money coming out the door? Is that a good response? Is that what we should be saying to producers?
Yeah, so correct. We're doing what we can right now to try to figure out how to effectively use that money when we do get it. And it would be safe to say that they have a better opportunity or a better chance of getting funding because of this large influx of funds we're going to be expecting. We're expecting a little increase here in 23, but then a much larger increase in 24. And if they have an application that they've been waiting for a couple of years for funding on, and they just aren't getting any movement, they should have that conversation with their local point of contact to talk about, what can I do to be more competitive? Is there another practice I can add to my application that I need anyway, but that would make it a better application or a higher priority to be funded? That's a constant conversation. If someone's not getting funding, we want to help them, and they obviously want to do what they need to do to get funding. So it's a conversation on, why is there no funds for me? Maybe they're in a highly competitive geographic pool of money that they're competing for, and they just need to do like one more practice or something on another land use or something to make them a little bit more competitive. So that's a conversation they can have, and we're willing to work through with, and love to have that conversation. How can we improve that application to get funding?
Okay, that is helpful. Other questions?
We do have a local work group meeting each year. I should mention an annual local work group meeting for producers to participate in. So if they are having any kind of issues or would like to get more information on where's the funding being spent or how they think it should be spent, or any issues they're running into at all with barriers or not getting funding, they can come to that local work group meeting. It's open to the public. Wisconsin usually has it in around June or July, and we advertise that public meeting and welcome those people to come and talk about their situation.
Great, that's good to know. Suzanne.
I have a question. Can you just go through on how your offices are staffed? So in our county, we have one office. Is there a person that does the paperwork and a technical person, and tell us how to make that first contact?
Yeah, sure. So we have gone under a reorganization. So things have changed the last couple of years a little bit, but each county typically has an admin person, a technical person, and a conservation planner. So we usually call the planner like a soil conservationist, and we have like a soil conservation technician for somebody that kind of designs structural practices like maybe grass waterways or dams, and then an admin person to help us organize applications and communicate, get documents to producers, that kind of thing. Typically that's what we'll have in each office, and then overseeing a group of counties will be a district conservationist. And that really will be the person that represents the counties. They're involved in holding that local work group meeting, bringing forth priorities for that county or that geographic area in terms of resources and how to prioritize where we're spending funds. So if you're having any issues getting through, I would say talk to the district conservationist that represents your county or group of counties. They can really, they're really in charge of managing the workload and what's going on in that county. So the district conservationist.
Great, thank you. A reminder that in the file, in the file section for this session, we do have the sort of generic 5 ways to work with NRCS that might be helpful for folks to give to landowners and producers. So what did I want to do? I want to take we have just a little bit of time and segueing from what Melissa said, and it does seem very important that making connections to NRCS are extremely valuable, and that many of us can be advocates for our landowners and producers with NRCS. And that seems like a valuable role to be playing, again, where there is the capacity to do that. NRCS is not the only game in town, and we understand that, and particularly in the Midwest, there are state programs that are also making funding available in various types of ways. So we wanted to take a few minutes at the end of this session to talk about it and to talk about what you all would find helpful, because again, we have an opportunity. We view this training as the first step in a sort of year's engagement with all of you. And in the very first session, what we were able to offer when we did this training a year ago, because we only had 3 states engaged, we had separate breakout groups where we brought together participants along with their state NRCS, either state conservationist or the Melissa equivalent, along with the assistant state con for partnerships, to make those connections, as well as state agencies of agriculture where there are programs being offered that are for financial assistance, as well as state-led networks that are focused on soil health. And I think my question for all of you would be, would that be helpful? I don't have a good sense of, from the participants in this training, whether you have relationships with either your district conservationist, as Melissa suggests, or with the state office. I think I would encourage folks to have relationships at both of those levels. But I'm wondering whether that would be helpful if we were to set up a state-specific conversation. And so, Carrie, I'm thinking about North Carolina. Would it, and for those of you, Allison, from West Virginia, would it help to put you in a virtual room with both State Department of Ag, NRCS, any partners who work specifically on soil health, just to make those introductions? Or do people feel like they've already got a very good grasp of those connections? So I'm curious, I'm wondering what people think, because we are happy to do that, but only if it's helpful for folks. So that's an open-ended question that I would love feedback on from all of you.
Chris, I think that would be really helpful. We do have a relationship in North Carolina with Julius George and Tim Beard. But it never hurts to be in the room again to maybe start, reiterating that we are going to be moving forward with trying to help people be more soil healthy,
Mhm.
and thinking about maybe plans that we can make with them to move forward with our plans, and maybe even have questions. We may have individual questions, about the operation or something that they might can contribute to.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful, Carrie. Who else? All right. What about you guys from Iowa? I'm looking at Emily and Brian. You have good connections. Would it help to?
I think it would only benefit us to have a meeting like that. We do have good relationships, I think, at the state level. I can't necessarily speak beyond that. I'm looking at Brian now. But I think it would only be to our benefit to have a reconnection.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and on the local level, we have a handful of regional land stewardship staff, and I think they have a decent relationship with the county NRCS and FSA folks. But yeah, more touches could never hurt, I'm sure. So.
Okay. How about those of you from West Virginia?
Pretty good relationship with our county office and our office, mostly focused on easements and conservation plans and the easement applications. As far as soil health, I haven't really discussed that with them.
Right.
But so it wouldn't be a bad idea to talk to them about that.
Okay. How about folks from Michigan?
I have a pretty good relationship with Brian Thomas, who does the ASAP ALE program, and I talk to him about a lot of other programs that he has when people ask questions. But regarding soil health, we've never really had that conversation, really. So,
Right.
I've talked with local and state about soil health and a lot of these issues and their standards and ours quite frequently already, but
Okay.
Either way it'd be fine.
That's helpful. And Wisconsin, you have Melissa here in the room, but Melissa has other folks, and I don't personally know what's available through DATCAP, if anything. But again, I think that we are looking at having these conversations would be to bring together sort of many of the players, both federal, state, and to the extent that there are better connections to be made or additional connections to be made with whoever's doing sort of networks or other organizations that are focused on soil health. I'm curious whether that would be helpful for those of you in Wisconsin.
Yeah, Chris, I'll go ahead and speak on that. I think any discussions to help facilitate, working with different partners and our NRCS would be helpful. If anything else, just to, serve as a network opportunity and just ability to coordinate stuff further.
Great. Okay, and I see Suzanne with a thumbs up. All right. Well, thank you. With all of that, we are at time. And so I think we should say thank you to Melissa. It was really nice, really helpful to have that background on financial assistance and how to engage